Hello, podcast lovers. Thank you so much for coming back. I am so happy that you decided to tune back in. Today, I have the privilege of talking to an amazing, extraordinary woman. She, in my opinion, is an absolute powerhouse. We met each other over LinkedIn, and it's when I went on her website, I was blown away. Her not only by her beauty, but also by her intelligence. And so, Dr. Cynthia Benson, thank you so very much for being here. I'm so grateful that you took the time. I know you're so busy, but thank you so much for taking the time to share with me a conversation today about mainly unlocking human potential and what that in general means. But hello and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's my favorite topic, so I'm excited to have the opportunity to continue our conversation.
Yes, yeah. I know when we first personally connected, your story on its own is already so, so empowering and so interesting. But I, also really like the fact that you took whatever you're teaching right now and actually applied it in your own life too. And for me, I kind of know your story a little bit, but I love to hear it again. If you could maybe just share from your own perspective, where did it kind of all start for you, where you started to unlock your human potential? Like, take us back a little bit, and you can go as deep as you want and as broad, but however you prefer to elaborate on this question. But I think it's very valuable what you will share.
Sure, thank you. Well, without going too deep and too boring, I would say that I sort of fell into business. I had a broadcasting undergraduate degree, and I loved many things about broadcasting and film and really thought that I would have a career there. But my very first job, professional job, I had a female leader, and she really leaned in to me. She invited me to meetings that I really had nothing to contribute at 23 years old, right out of, barely out of college. But I watched and I observed and I listened and I learned so much from her. And I really credit Nancy to being that first real inspiration to me of what it means to be a great leader. And I
Mm,
fell in love with business. And so I pursued the business track, which led me into human resources, largely because I had this innate ability to connect strategy and people. I was fascinated by business, fascinated by numbers and budgets and all the things, the sort of the geeky side of business, but I had this intuition around how people connect to that and ultimately make things happen. And that just sort of evolved over many years and my own journey as a coach and a leader and a mentor of others. And I felt at home there. I felt like those days that I went home feeling like this was a great day were the days that I had been investing in another human being and listening to their story and unpacking and unlocking their potential, because
mhm,
so many people keep it sort of stuffed down, and it's humility and all the things that we're taught, particularly as women, is that we don't share those things, we don't put our aspirations into the universe, work hard, you'll get tapped when it's your turn. And so I really loved bringing that out of people. Tell me more about your story. Tell me what lights you up. Tell me what fills your bucket. And let's figure out how we allow you to do more of those things.
mhm.
And so that's kind of where it started on a corporate journey and a professional front. But as you know, my corporate journey had a bit of a disruption a couple of years ago. Um,
Mhm.
I had embarked on writing my first book, Now Near Next, and is focused on helping women in particular really look deep and understand their human potential and to actualize it and not put it off.
Mhm.
Because as women, we put everybody else as the priority. I know
Yeah.
you have a young son, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And, it's easy to pour everything into neighbors, family, church, friends, community groups. Um, and women tend to put themselves last. So the book was really about how do you put yourself first, or at least among the top three, and start working on your future today. And I wrote it in first person with the idea that my blueprint to my next would be 3 to 5 years from now in my encore career, where I wanted to coach and write and speak and consult. And my position as the chief administrative officer and executive vice president of a very large health system was eliminated during a CEO transition. And so
Mm.
there I found myself at 55, almost 56 years old, single empty nester, thinking, oh my goodness, in this last portion of my professional career journey, I have to go find another high-powered C-suite job, relocate, do all of these things. And the whole idea sounded exhausting and terrifying
Yeah.
until I realized I had a blueprint already for my next. And instead of doing that 3 to 5 years from now, I did it right now. But it convicted me to the methodology, because the reality is 99% of women don't have any idea of what their next is, and they're not making progress toward it. And nor had I historically. It was purely because the stars aligned, the spirit world aligned, pick, pick what works for you, that I had poured into my book and lived into that I actually had the chart and the path to my next. And now I want all people to have that opportunity.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I want to touch base on two things that you just said, which the first one was that you are really up for wanting to find out people what fills your bucket and what really drives you. I feel like really understanding for oneself, if you are the driver of such bucket, you also are responsible to fill your own bucket, right? And so I think that's kind of like ties into the next segue of what you just said with, what's coming next. Because I feel like so often we believe in our mind, well, this dream has so much time. I have time to fulfill this dream. I know I want to get to that, and that's a dream of mine. But at first, I need to do this. And then I need to do that. And then when this is done, well, then only then I can actually go and fulfill my dream, which really, in your example, the opposite really had happened. The book was kind of written almost like a journey. That's kind of like how it feels to me when you talk about it, versus never having an emphasis of this is going to be a book that I'm trying to sell. It was more like a relief out of this is really what it is for me. This is how I mastered certain things. And now, since I have the segue of not really knowing what to do and where to go because this door is closing out of my
Right.
control,
Right.
this dream that wasn't maybe even a dream all of a sudden became a substance to make it a dream or make it a reality. And so I
That's
think
right.
so many of us, we are in situations where we feel like, I know I want to do this. I don't know how to get there. And because I don't know how to get there, because I don't have a plan, because I don't have the driving bucket, I'm just going to wait.
That's
And
right.
and I think that's really the human potential, or one side of human potential, where we tend to neglect instead of pouring more into it. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And women in particular, because
Mhm.
we tend to, and you said, you mentioned all the reasons, right? We put it off
Mm,
generally because of fear.
mm,
We don't know what should be our next. We
right.
don't know if we know quite how to accomplish what is next. And so, what is the easier path? The easier path is to put everything else in front of that. Well, I'll wait till the kids go off to school. I'll wait till they graduate college. I'll wait till my partner gets their fabulous job, right? So we keep
Right.
kicking the can down the road, and then at some point we look up, maybe in a situation like mine, which happens to us, we look up and we're like, oh my goodness, I've been kicking that can down the road. And now here I am at whatever stage of life, and I haven't been chipping away in progress to get where I want to go,
Mm,
or any number of things. Life's messy. We go through a divorce, we go through a loss. You know, many things can happen that become disruptive. And again, we look up and suddenly we're kind of thinking, gosh, other people seem to be further along than I am. And it's because we've left our agency in other people's hands. So, hearkening back to what you said, we have to own what fills our cup, right? The moment we put that, our agency, in our boss's hands or in the company's hands or in someone else's hands, and we give up that agency, we've just really acquiesced our responsibility, instead of
mm,
saying, I'm a better partner, mother, worker, friend, daughter, sister, brother, what have you, when I take care of me, when I'm sure that I'm filling what brings me intrinsic satisfaction, what I'm really good at, what I can impact in this world, my sense of purpose. So,
mhm,
I mean, imagine for
mm,
you, have there been things along your journey that you've said, "Ooh, that's a dream of mine, but
mhm.
not now, someday."
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that you say that because, this podcast, for instance, our resilience and rebirth, it's never been my intention ever, ever, not once in my entire life did I say I want to become a podcaster and my dream is to have my own podcast. I've never said that once. But here we are, just because, out of my own healing journey, I felt the need, almost like similar to you, of speaking on things, just like you started to write your book, where I
Mhm.
was like, this, I at least have to say it for me. And then, somehow through divine timing and, the universe's help, it kind of turned into what it is now. And now I'm like meeting these most extraordinary humans like yourself, that are sharing similar viewpoints and mindsets and just out there really to help the collective in their niche of what they're really focused on,
Right.
and I think my biggest thing for myself was, what is my talent really? What is really my so-called potential? I knew I was good at many things and I knew I had some talents. I mean, I speak 4 languages, I moved to this country by myself, I have 2 degrees, like all of that I knew, but it didn't feel necessarily like a talent. It didn't feel like a potential that I was carrying. It didn't feel like a gift that I was giving or getting,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I, for the long time, just couldn't really give the gift to myself of self
Sure.
respect and self
Sure.
confidence and self love, of like, no, the fact that you do speak 4 languages is extraordinary and you're
It
allowed to give
is.
yourself credit. But because I was born with it, I spoke 4 languages since I was able to speak. It didn't seem to me as wow, to when I now tell it to somebody, they're like, what? Wow, and so I didn't see my talents. And I don't know if this applies to you, or it might apply to so many of us, where I wasn't able to see my gift as a gift, or I wasn't able to see the potential that I was able to unlock in somebody else as my own at all.
That's right.
And I think
That's right.
getting to that part of really realizing and understanding, I think that's the journey that is so different for everybody, and the length of it is so different. Some people like realize that very fast, the gift that they have received, and they work that gift and they execute it. And some never even consider it to be a gift at all.
Some are still struggling to find it too.
Yeah.
There's those that are just in the churn of life, that they're in this sort of rinse and repeat cycle that
Yeah.
doesn't bring them joy, and it doesn't feel fulfilling, and they're really seeking. So I would invite you and each individual listening, one of the ways to tap into really exploring, where is my natural talent? And when we think about
Mm,
natural talent, we're talking about things you can't, it's not knowledge and skill. It's not that which you learn. It's that hardwired DNA. You can't help yourself. And so I use an ACEs model, ACES model, and I'm going to do that in reverse. First of all, what is it that you do spontaneously? you cannot help yourself. It's the individual that walks into a conference room and everyone's lined up and milling around, and the individual that looks and says, if they added two stanchions and one more person, this would be so much more organized, right? And then there's the other person who just assumes the chaos. It just is, they're oblivious to the fact that there's a better way of doing things. That spontaneous, you can't help yourself, you see things a certain way. You do it with excellence. What is that thing that people come to you and they say, you're so good at this, could you help me? You're better at these things than most people. It's consistent. You're not better than most sometimes. You don't do this thing sometimes. You're not creative sometimes or strategic sometimes. You're always strategic, or you're always creative, or you always have attention to detail. And a really important factor is it's affirming. It feels good when I'm doing it, right? There's a lot of things that you can
Mm.
do and do well, I can do and do well, that don't necessarily bring me joy.
Right.
It's those things that when you, at the end of the day, you say, that was a really good day. And when you start to unpack your day, what specifically were the behaviors, the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that felt good, you did with excellence, came naturally and spontaneously? Those are the things we begin to journal to understand our natural gifts. And then, like anything, gifts are like a muscle. They atrophy if we don't exercise them. So if you have a great gift of creativity or a great gift of strategy or attention to detail, but you're serving or working in a place that doesn't allow you to exercise that gift and that potential, it doesn't grow very much. But if you lean into those strengths, exponential growth, right? So, what you're experiencing by having a platform to connect with people and bring people in and have a shared message around the power of human beings and humanity and all the things that you're exploring is
Mm.
your gift. And
Mm.
I assume that it feels good when you're doing it and it makes you feel proud of what you're putting out there into the world. And you're touching other people's lives in the process.
Mm.
That's a natural gift and talent. And by virtue of the fact that you took on the podcast, is giving you the opportunity every time you do this to strengthen those muscles and to have that exponential growth of, what will this look like 2 years from now?
Yeah, I loved the breakdown of exactly, because I'm a very logistic person in my mind.
Yeah.
So this was amazingly explained of how you really even find out what you're gifted in, what you are really naturally are so good at without, like you said, no, not book smart, not
Right.
anything, but just that DNA driven, intuitive, this is really what makes me drive. And I loved how you break that down. I think everybody is so much better to get now. But I also feel like when we do that, it does require some time um
Mhm.
to really hone into it. And like you said, really after each day, go back into your day, sit down with yourself for a moment and really analyze what part of this day had made me actually feel the best, or where I felt like, oh, I don't even, the answer is right here. Even if you just
That's right.
told the answer to yourself, and it does feel like it does take a little bit time of solitude within your own
Sure.
self to honor that time of like, okay, I'm going to invest some time. You know how people invest time in the gym and they invest time into
Right.
learning or reading books or whatever. And I feel like when we use some time in exactly this aspect of learning again about self, you know,
Sure.
what is that really that drives me? Like what is it really that I honestly want to feel like doing today? I
Mhm.
know I have this whole to-do list and all these responsibilities, and I will get to them when I have to. But in between, what is it really that I would love to do right now? And so periodically during the day, I literally do this to myself. And sometimes when it just comes up, I feel like frozen yogurt. Okay, you know what? Literally, I'm not kidding you. If I don't have a meeting, I drop everything and I take myself for 30 minutes. I walk
Mhm.
down the street, take myself a frozen yogurt, and take that short moment to just satisfy. I don't know, my inner child, my
Right?
my inner feeling of like,
Yes.
because if we don't reward ourselves with small gestures towards ourselves, you know, and it could be simple things as just smiling at yourself in the mirror. Hi,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
hey, you, good job.
Affirmation.
You know
Yes.
what I mean? Or like those small details of like, if you are at a grocery store and you see a beautiful flower, buy it if you can for yourself.
Right.
Grab it. And, you know, I mean, for me, it's really small details that really
Hmm.
drive me in life. I'm not really that materialistic girl, but it's those small details. And I feel like when we, and you said it so beautifully, like I'm glad this was recorded. Because the way you just really explained it step by step, and you
Yes.
know, the I would love for you to tell me one more time the breakdown of the
Sure.
increments that you said. I would love that, how everything is so nicely connected, because it gives you really an idea of like, if you don't know, start with that.
That's
Start with
right.
what Dr. Cynthia just explained, because this is such a simple way and such an authentic way to your own self to remain true to yourself, to just ask you. You don't need to ask your neighbor. You don't, you know, just stay
That's
within you.
exactly right. You know, so think about it in terms of aces and spaces. None of
Mhm,
us walk on water. So our aces are it's affirming, it's something I do consistently, I do it with excellence, and I do it spontaneously. So
mm,
ACEs, the acronym.
mm,
The spaces are the things that just don't come as naturally. They're just not as hardwired. And the reality is, this beautiful world we live in, everyone has different aces and spaces. And what I love to say is every single human being has natural gifts and talents. The question is talent for what? The
mhm,
question is talent for what? I mean, when I was in hospitality and then later in healthcare, we would have housekeepers who the joy that they felt as they would the very last mop of that room as they followed themselves out the door and closed that door, and the sense of fulfillment that that room was sparkling and smelled wonderful and everything was ticked and tied, and that felt so good. That's a natural talent. And so it, whether you're a truck driver or a bartender or a C-suite executive or a stay-at-home mom, you pick it, but it's those things that really fit that ACEs model. But I also want to add to, you made a really amazing point about time. And I love that you take time on your frozen yogurt walk. That's amazing. I take my dog out for a little stroll, just to clear my head sometimes. And I've started doing it without my earbuds,
mhm,
without my music on. I heard a spiritual leader recently talking about the fact that just being in nature and listen to the
oh,
birds, listen to the wind, right? Listen to what's happening around you rather than having something um, going through your earbuds. And I've enjoyed that a lot. I find I do a lot of really creative thinking during that time. But here's
mm,
what I would offer to the busy person that's listening: 7 minutes a day. It's less than 10, it's more than five. And so even if you can't find 30 minutes with all the spinning plates, if you can, we can all find 7 minutes. Get up 7 minutes earlier, right? Go to bed 7 minutes later, 7 minutes, and journal. Listen to a portion of a podcast, meditate, read a portion of a book that you've picked up. But the whole point, the through line in all of this is start intentionally working on your future today.
mhm,
Not tomorrow, not when the kids go off to school, not when, today,
mhm,
7 minutes. So if you
mhm,
start to fantasize that your next is something you'd like to have happen 18 months from now, or 3 years from now, or 6 months from now, what can you start doing right now to start to move that line toward your next? In some cases, baby steps, in other cases, it's a sprint. You choose, but you're making the momentum and putting the energy forward.
mhm. Yeah. And it's really, you know, it's really the allowance also to allow yourself actually to even possibly change your mind on things.
Yes.
because so often we're so rooted in specific motions and situations and people and places and situations where it's very difficult to break that pattern because what would this mean? I leave
That's
my
wow.
safety net. I don't know what's my next move. And the fear of unknown is very huge, even though, which is so interesting to me, fear isn't even a real emotion. Yet it is so prevalent and so huge for so many of us when that fear kicks in of like, I don't know what's next. When really, when I found myself in really fearful situations, what I started to try to master at first was to say, okay, I acknowledge that I'm afraid. I'm allowed to be afraid because my situation really calls me to actually be fearful. That's okay.
Mhm.
But I choose in this moment to put my faith above my fear and to
Mm,
walk with that and to just be like, you know what? Even if the worst thing that can happen in this, and I would be honest with myself, I'd be like a lawyer, plus list, minus list.
mhm.
What is the worst thing that could really happen? Because for me, if
That's right.
I'm really having it on a paper and I'm really openly speaking it out, to me, there's no way of then having any caps on, or like no stronghold can keep me because I'm speaking it out. I'm showing you I'm afraid, yet I take the leap of faith of speaking on it and discussing it with, I mean, for me it's God, but like, in general, discussing it
Right.
with the
Yes.
universe or just letting it out.
Yes.
And so just speaking on that, allowing yourself really to feel what you feel in this moment and not say, oh, okay, no, I don't want to think about that because if I think about it, then like just own the thought, not dwelling on it necessarily, but allow the thought to move through you until where you're like you acknowledging it. Because when I started to acknowledging my fear, and I'm like, I know you here. That's okay. You're allowed to be here until I decide that you're not anymore.
Mhm.
Right. And
Mhm.
that simple shift in my mind, which now to me seems simple, but it wasn't simple at the time at all, to just really shift gears up here and be like, you know what? Fear, faith, that was the
Love
hardest
this.
for me because my reality did not allow me to see beyond what was happening. My actual reality did not show me anything where I'm like, oh yeah, there's the rainbow and there's the sun. No,
That
it was
makes
it was
sense.
dark and gloomy and rainy, and it's like I don't see anything other than that. How do I get
Yeah.
out of that thought? You know?
Mm.
And so that for me was pivotive when I decided in that moment to just really feel afraid and not push it away anymore, not suppress it, but actually, yeah, welcome it almost in a sense of like, I welcome you, but now I tell you to exit.
And you did another thing. You really got underneath what the fear was about.
Mm,
So the women in particular that we studied, and I think that this is universal. I mean, it's universal for women, and I suspect same is true for men, is that when we look at the fear of why we're not moving forward, it could be, I don't have time, which is really based in fear. And it's really based in, I don't want to fail as a mother. I don't want to
mhm,
fail as being trying to do both. Or it's based in, I don't know if I'm good enough and worthy to do that. So underneath the fear is part one. Part two is, well, what am I really afraid of? And the question I love to ask clients is that I partner with is, what is the worst thing that could happen? What is the worst thing that could happen in the situation? And and then we can talk about how do we mitigate that. But oftentimes when you start to put out the worst case scenario, the probability of that worst case scenario is usually pretty small. And so I love this tool we introduced in Now Near Next, which is pause, protest, pivot, and pray. And it's essentially what you said with this sort of fear faith, except it gives you the guided process that you mentioned. It's the moment I feel myself paralyzed by fear, we'll use fear in this case. The moment I feel myself paralyzed by this fear, I pause and acknowledge it. Your point is you have to
Mm,
acknowledge it first, 100%. I
mhm.
protest it. What is the worst thing that could happen? How bad could this really be? And what evidence do I have of that? And what is the true probability of that? So we're really protesting this inner narrative that we're telling ourselves. We pivot, in your case, to faith or into a new track in our mind. Even if that happens, I've got this, I have the strength, I have the support network, what have you, or the chances of that happening are really very slim. Therefore, I'm putting into the universe that this pivot is, this is going to be a great next step for me. This is going to be a fabulous new chapter. This is exactly what I was ready for in this moment. And then pray. And I leave pray up to whatever speaks to the individual.
Right.
But ultimately to say, God, universe, I'm putting it out there. I'm putting these positive thoughts into the world, and I'm releasing this and moving forward. And so
Mm.
pause, protest, pivot, pray, and really to unpack, acknowledge it, explore it, uh, really, question it, and then move
Right.
into a healthier mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting because back in the days when I felt like there would be something, I would honestly, it would overtake my day, my
Mhm.
week, my month of dwelling on the same issue that fundamentally I had no control over, which was so interesting now looking back. And today, if I were to have a conversation with somebody and this somebody would propose to me a problem, I think my first question would be, what is it in this moment that you can do seriously in realistic time in your own control to make this problem go away?
Mhm.
And if the answer is nothing, I can do nothing about it, then wouldn't it be so much simpler to just let it be and don't even worry about it anymore and just let it go? Almost like, you read a magazine, read an article in a magazine and you read it, you're like, oh, okay, great article, moving on. Kind of like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it's like, if we cannot really do anything in our own human power in this moment to contribute for this problem to get better, then what is the point of wasting thought and energy and fear-based, created in your own mind thoughts,
Mhm.
making, in Germany, we have a saying, and the saying goes, I don't know if it's going to be as cool in English, but the saying goes, don't make an elephant out of a mosquito.
Ah, yes.
Because it's so small, but in your mind, you're making it so, so, so big because you keep dwelling, and then the dwelling thought becomes a bigger snowball. And then all of a sudden, you have an elephant sitting in your head. And you're like, my head is so heavy. Yeah,
Right.
because we tend to, and I'm so guilty of this, back in the days, I tend to so dwell on it that I literally would exhaust myself, Dr. Cynthia. I would
Mhm.
exhaust myself emotionally, mentally, to the part where I just couldn't have any energy. I had no fun doing anything, even though the funnest things for me were to, for instance, paint a picture or go for a run or something. I would have no energy to do even that because it was so exhausted of dwelling on something I had no control over at all.
Mhm.
And so for a logistic person like myself, it helps me to be like, okay, really, is there something I can do? No. Good. Moving on. Go and have a,
And then move your energy
yeah,
and momentum someplace that makes sense.
right.
It's then to constantly keep that energy moving forward. I had a recent client talking to me. She's in an environment at work where she's really miserable. There's been a lot of downsizing. Her job has been changed quite a bit, and she's really miserable. She feels very vulnerable. She
Mm,
feels very at risk, and she doesn't feel like her values align anymore with the organization she works for because of the way she perceives the handling of a lot of these things. And so I said to her, so what are you doing about that? are you actively looking to move on? And she said, well, no, not yet. And I said, why? And she said, well, to be honest, I'm afraid. Well, what are you afraid of? Well, what if I go to another company and I lose the convenience of working from home, which I really value? And then what if this new company, I lose the benefit of working from home and it's just as toxic and all the things? Well, what if that happened, right? So instead, she's paralyzed. And instead, she's doing nothing. She's staying in a toxic environment where she is seeking outside counseling because it's impacting her so much emotionally,
Wow.
but not willing to look for based out of fear. And so we started to unpack, well, how bad could it possibly be? What is the worst case scenario? And so say that happens. Is that the end of the world? What then? You look for something else. And what do you do to mitigate that? You do your due diligence up front, but you don't do nothing.
Right.
Start
And
working on your future today,
yeah,
even
and it's so
minutes.
interesting what you just said, because even if that were to happen, just in that moment, allowing yourself just to think about that. You don't need to execute, but just take a moment, just think about, okay, what if you do have to work from home? Take that thought, let it sit for a day.
Mhm.
What if that really happens? You cannot work from home anymore. Would that be really so bad? Just let it marinate without needing to make any moves in this moment. And also, it's so interesting because that if world is
Mhm.
so, I mean, it's doing a good job, but my thing with if worlds was always that I remember that every if world always has another side. What if you cannot work from home anymore? But what if you don't and you meet the perfect new owner, new investor, new business partner, most compatible soulmate, new best friend, you name
Exactly.
it, in this environment that actually was yanked out of you because they know better, put you
Mm.
in this new place that you're actually so afraid of, thinking, what if? But what if you actually do and you find out you can really fly? Then
Mm.
what? Because every if always has another side to it, and
Sure
instead of
it
saying,
does.
oh, my wing was broken, what if I can't fly ever again? But then also saying at the same moment, but the other 50% of the if, what if I fly better than ever?
Mhm.
And I always love to compare this example to like these amazing athletes out there, especially basketball players, because I'm a huge basketball fan. But when basketball players have like really strong injuries, like their Achilles, or like really injuries where it seems like for that moment they can never ever perform the way they did. But then you see them come back from such a severe injury and actually play better than before,
Mhm.
and it's so that I feel like when we just remember that, when we just try to remember, and what helped me along the way was always have little sticky notes all over my house. So I'm not kidding you. I would have like some in the bathroom, I would have some at the kitchen counter, where every time when something were to come, I would just have a reminder of like, okay, 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 I remember now. And so if
Sure.
we remember that that if world can also be if amazing turns out to be, not like just the
I
worst, but
think
also
that's
the
such a good example. It's really flipping that. And it's just moving the line out for further at
Mm,
your pace,
right.
right? So my pace may be different than somebody else's, and also may be depending on what barrier am I trying to break? What line am I trying to redefine or redraft? But
Mm,
getting past the paralyzation of fear and justifying it with all the reasons we can all justify. I'm too busy. Now's not a good time. This one
yeah.
needs me. My daughter just went back to work. She's a stay-at-home mom. She has a bunch of side hustles. She's incredible. And she went back to work full time. She's been out of full-time work for 4 years, raising little ones. And But when she was looking for a job, she would say, well, Mom, I have to be home at this time because Ledger really needs me to be there to help him with his homework. And I have to have this kind of flexibility because I direct the middle school play and I need flexibility during these weeks. And so I said, okay, so let's play that out. What if you had high school nanny that could do homework with Ledger so that when you got home from work, you weren't having to do homework, and somebody closer to having studied fifth grade, whatever, or sixth grade, whatever, could tutor him and that he would listen to them. And that would be one less thing that you had to do. And could he really thrive in that situation? What if the new organization knew that you dedicated time to directing the school play and thought that that was great and would let you off at 3 o'clock for those 8 weeks? It never occurred to her. Again, we put arbitrary barriers and lines in front of us and then live within them without questioning them, pushing them, erasing them, redefining them. It's our own narrative. It's what we think other people want of us. It's society. And it can be very constricting,
And limiting too.
so limiting, so
Yeah.
limiting, and limit our potential.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because she did find
totally.
a job that she is working outside of the home, and she has been able to arrange childcare, and she's absolutely loving it, and she's working with people with disabilities and is just feeling her gifts and impacting lives in such a beautiful way. But she would not have even explored that had the conversation not happened. How many times do we do that to ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so, so, so interesting because we all do it in some form in our life, in some life situation. We all been there where it's like, this is too unrealistic,
That's
or
right.
this is too, you know, too crazy to really think about, or this is too outrageous to even execute or whatever, and it's really interesting how we, yeah, limit sometimes ourselves. We have so much power, and sometimes we don't realize how powerful we really are internally and what beautiful creations we really are individually. But I feel like, with all the practice that we talked about, it's a great way of finding that again in yourself, like all the examples that you shared, how to really, find that gift, find
Mhm.
that, unlock your own talent that you maybe never knew was there because you simply didn't pay attention because you executed it so robotically because it comes so naturally to you, not even knowing that that's your biggest asset within you that you're carrying and that you can have an impact on others too, and I think when we just take our time, and I think 7 minutes per day, who doesn't have 7 minutes? In all honesty, who doesn't really have 7 minutes? It could be in the car, it could be in the shower, it could be, in the grocery store, slowly meditating while you're pushing the cart through the aisle. Just, you can zone out everywhere, really, in a sense. Doesn't have to be a specific place, doesn't have to be a specific way. Find your own way. My mom, she always told me, she's like, you can talk to God anywhere. It
Mm,
doesn't have to be a specific place. You can talk to him anywhere, anywhere. And it doesn't matter who's around you. Just simply close your eyes and do your thing, you know? Sometimes it
mhm,
could be just in your mind, mental conversation, or it could just really be in a quiet place where, I mean, I prefer to be quiet and by myself, but
sure.
if that's not a given situation, doesn't mean I'm not going to talk to him. I'll find another way. But yeah, but I think 7 minutes, it's such a great starting point of like, okay, I'm gonna make it a point and really be, like you said, consistent with it too. No matter if it's snowing out there, no matter if, you're on your monthly cycle, or you have a long day or whatever, just, stay with it. Stay with
Mhm.
it.
Unapologetically guilt-free.
I like that.
That's the most important part of the 7 minutes, that it's
Yeah.
unapologetic, guilt-free investment in you, not
Yeah.
in someone else, in you. Yeah.
Wow.
And start today. For those listening, they've already embraced a few minutes of giving back, right? They've taken this time to listen in to the podcast and hopefully are walking away feeling a sense of fulfillment, having some new nuggets, some new information that makes them feel empowered to move forward and continue to invest in themselves. So, cheers to those who have been listening because you're, check one for today.
Yes. And I honestly don't even want to add anything anymore to that because it was so beautifully said. But I do wanted to ask your permission to put your book link and your website link below this description of this episode that when anybody feels the need of, hopefully wanting to read your book for themselves or even as a great gift to somebody, because books are great gifts. I love receiving books as gifts.
They are
You
great
know,
gifts.
yeah. Or, and just hop on your website and maybe even have a one-on-one with you, a conversation and see maybe how you can unlock somebody else's, human potential and help. Because I think, you're doing an amazing job of like really staying so humble and so kind and always remembering that your path was not as simple either. And you learned so much from your own life that you're including in your business. And I think that's to me the most best partner to work with, where I feel like this partner that I'm working with understands me and relates to me,
Mm.
So if that's okay with you, I would love to put your
That would be
description below.
wonderful. We'll put that in the
Mhm.
show notes, and I offer a free strategy session for anybody that would like to have some time just to explore. I work with individuals through career coaching, executive coaching, and group coaching, and would love the opportunity to continue to help whoever needs a little nudge or maybe a little kick in the pants to work on investing themselves. Thank you so much. This was such a blessing.
This was such a blessing. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for sharing, these golden nuggets, these, nuggets of wisdom. And thank you for being so open with your heart and like sharing truth that, hopefully will move everybody that really needs it. And for you podcast lovers, another great one. Thank you so much for tuning back in. I'm your host, Žana. And until next time, stay rooted, stay grounded, and always stay connected to love, the strongest force in the universe.